Well, good afternoon and welcome to our 20th anniversary Wisconsin State Conference. I am super excited to have all of you here. As we all know, November is Gratitude Month, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank each of you for your dedication to positively impacting the lives of children across Wisconsin. And as we're finding in the chat box, way beyond the borders of Wisconsin. So thank you to all you out-of-staters. Understanding and recognizing the importance of culture and gender experience is vitally important when working with children. That's why the focus of our conference this year is representation. The children we serve come from a wide variety of backgrounds and experiences. In our daily work with one of our nation's most vulnerable populations, advocates, staff must be prepared to quickly understand and adapt to their situations. Our speakers this week will provide great resources and insights. So we're going to say this: we acknowledge that some of these topics can be tough to discuss. We recognize that. However, we feel they're vitally important to achieving the best interest of the children that we serve. Because ultimately, all of us want every child to have a safe and permanent home with a family who values and loves them for who they are. So 2 housekeeping items. If you would like to receive credit for participating in this webinar and the entire week. So every day I want you to type your name and your state into the chat box so we can track who participated and who didn't. And then the second thing is if you have any questions, if you could just please type them into the chat box. And when the judge pauses, we have a moderator here who will ask your questions. And then finally, but absolutely not least, I am so honored to introduce our first speaker. She is a deeply passionate and experienced advocate for children. I absolutely adore her. And please welcome Chief Judge Elaine Smith of the Lakota tribe. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Ani Megizige Indigenicas. Hello, my name is Elaine Spiegelwoman, but I'm more often known as Elaine Smith. Odawa Zaga Iganing and Dunjaba. I am from Lakota. Lakota is home of one of the 6 Wisconsin Ojibwe bands of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. You will hear me refer to myself as Ojibwe or Anishinaabe, but not Chippewa, which is kind of a common reference for our tribe, because that is not a name that was chosen by the indigenous people who lived in northern Wisconsin. Lakota is located in northwest Wisconsin, about an hour south of Duluth, near Hayward in Sawyer County. It's a beautiful place to live and work. I'm the Chief Tribal Judge for the Lakota Band of Lake Superior Ojibwe. I've held this appointed position since July 2019, and before that I was a practicing attorney for 20 years. My legal practice focused on federal Indian law and tribal law as a tribal attorney. I am licensed in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Texas. Our tribal court has personal jurisdiction over tribal members, non-member Indians, and non-Indians who have entered into a relationship with the tribe through employment, contract, or marriage with a tribal member. The court hears a great number of different types of civil cases every month, including the following: traffic violations like speeding within the exterior boundaries of the reservation. Since the tribe follows the Wisconsin Traffic Code, the assessment of fines is the same. Family law cases such as divorce, child custody, child protection, truancy, guardianship of children and adults, employment appeals, foreign judgment, paternity, child support enforcement, grandparent visitation, name change, conservation, election appeals, and general conduct, to name a few. During the last quarter of July 1st through September 30th, 462 cases were heard, and 77 new cases were filed. I'm the only law-trained judge, but I am assisted by a magistrate who holds a master's degree in legal studies from the University of Oklahoma. And together we seem to manage all the cases that come through our court. In addition, the tribal court has a Healing to Wellness court that is in its last year of its grant. A Healing to Wellness court is similar to a drug court. The difference is that participants are encouraged to include cultural, and traditional practices in his or her case plan. These can include learning how to tap maple trees during the sugar bush season, which begins in September, or learn how to harvest wild rice or manoomin in August. Our participant can also join an Ojibwe language class or reach out to a cultural spiritual advisor who is a trusted elder. A healing to wellness court is also less punitive in that if a participant relapses, as is often the case with addictions, he or she is not picked up on a warrant and sent to jail, but rather may be given sanctions or be asked to increase services. The participant's case plan requires that they check in with the case manager on a weekly basis, have an AODA assessment and a mental health assessment, and submit to regular UA screening. The Wellness Court team, which is composed of people from various programs, offers consistent support and encouragement through its services. Our Healing to Wellness Court does not take referrals from the county court system, but our self-referrals are from a program like ICW, which is similar to CPS or Child Protection Services. Like many communities today, our community is in a crisis as many of our community members are addicted to methamphetamine and heroin. Often fentanyl is thrown into the mixture, which has caused many deaths by overdose. There have been many community members who have passed or been lost for this reason. The Healing to Wellness team tries to assist those tribal members to gain sobriety. Although a Healing to Wellness court can offer assistance to individuals with different risk levels, the majority of our participants are high risk, meaning their drug of choice is methamphetamine and heroin rather than THC. Since the start of our Healing to Wellness court in 2019, services in our community have increased with more providers, options for inpatient treatment, and sobriety meetings. But the need is great, and we have a need for many more services. As a tribal judge, I've had the opportunity to see firsthand the impact that this drug epidemic has had on children. As you all know very well, it is heartbreaking to see and hear the many stories. Prior to becoming a judge, my experience working for 3 different tribes in Wisconsin and Minnesota did not include practice in Indian child welfare law. The majority of my practice was transactional and focused on housing, elder law, employment, gaming regulation, business, and bankruptcy, to name a few. As a former tribal legislative counsel, I focused on drafting and amending tribal codes, writing policy, reviewing gaming regulations, and assisting with many other projects. Therefore, as a judge, I had a huge learning curve in the child protection arena. One of the first things that I recognized was the absence of a court-appointed special advocate, or CASA. In 2019, when I began to bring up the idea of CASA to people in Northwest Wisconsin, I did not meet one person who had heard of CASA or understood the role of CASA. I know that is changing now with CASA starting in Byrne County, which is a neighboring county to my home county of Sawyer. In addition, I saw that there was a shortage of attorneys in our area who were willing to accept an appointment as guardian ad litem, even though our tribal court budget had a small amount of money set aside for such a purpose. During the past 2 years, I'm happy to say that our court budget increased the funding for GALs, and we now have 4 attorneys willing to accept appointments. The majority of the appointments have been for child custody and guardianship cases, not child protection cases. Recently, I have appointed a GAL in 2 child protection cases, or what we call minor in need of care cases. The tribal court is now seeking funding to assist with payment of GALs for child protection cases, as the court does not receive any federal funding for this purpose. With the illegal drug epidemic in our community, child protection, or M&C cases have increased. The drug epidemic in our community, like many communities, began with the overprescription of opioids. When people could no longer get their opioid prescription, they moved on to heroin and synthetic opioids such as fentanyl. It is creating a crisis in our community as it is in other communities. I was first introduced to CASA while living in Austin, Texas back in the 80s and 90s. Although I was born in Hayward, My parents moved to Chicago when I was 4, and I grew up in the North Side, an area known as the DePaul area. I moved to Austin, Texas in 1983, when it was still a little funky state capital, known mostly for its music and laid-back lifestyle. My introduction to CASA was prior to law school, and I was intrigued by the idea that I could help a child who was experiencing the trauma of out-of-home placement. I applied to become a CASA in Travis County, was accepted, and went through the week-long training and background investigation. When I was sworn in as a CASA, I felt that I was about to do very important work, and I vowed to take it seriously. Right from the start, I asked for a case that might include a Native child, and the opportunity soon arose when 2 little girls of mixed descent, Mexican national father and a full-blood Cree mother, came to CASA's attention. The whole situation was heartbreaking, as these cases often are, and for me especially as a Native woman, or Anishinaabe Ikwe. I remember going to the jail to talk to the mother and looking at her, wondering how a Cree woman from Canada had ended up in Central Texas. I found out that she was a full-blood Cree woman from Canada who had been adopted out as a young child to a non-Native family. I asked her, and she said she knew nothing about her Cree origins or her culture or traditions. I also found out that the Canadian government had paid her $100,000 as reparation for being taken from her family, and she spent the entire sum on drugs while her small daughters were in her care. At the time of the mother's removal as a child, it was common practice to remove Native children from their families due to poverty or what was considered neglect. When I met the girls, they were very quiet in their foster care home, probably because they didn't understand what was happening. They had experienced so much trauma with their mother, and now through removal from family. I was able to drive them to a playground where they met their father. I remember how the little girls' eyes lit up when they saw him, and how happy they were to join him at the playground. The father was very happy too and hugged his children to him. He spoke to them in Spanish and told me gracias, or thank you. I spoke no Spanish and he didn't speak any English, but I understood that he loved his children. I sat nearby in that little playground while they visited and enjoyed each other's company. Everyone was sad when it was time to leave. There was a court hearing coming up, and the mother's adopted father and new wife were in attendance. They had flown to Texas from the East Coast to request placement of the 2 little girls. The grandfather wore a suit and looked very respectable, and his wife was very quiet. This was such a contrast to the simple father that I had met. As a CASA, I gave my report about the visitation with the parents and the children. In my report, I remember that I stated that I did not think it was in the children's best interest to be flown to the East Coast immediately to live with the grandparents, because I thought these girls would never see their father again and would be separated from their mother by hundreds of miles. I was heard, but the children were placed with the grandparents that day nevertheless. I hoped they would be happy eventually as they had each other, and I often wonder how their lives turned out. As a judge, I understand that these decisions are difficult to make, and I like to think that the judge made the right one. After spending 11 years in Austin, Texas, where I worked as a legal secretary for different law firms and then as a program administrator for the State Environmental Agency, I returned to Wisconsin in 1994 and worked for my tribe as a legal assistant and planner. While in Texas, I attended classes on weekends in a postgraduate program at what was then called Southwest Texas State University in San Marcos. There, I received a legal assistant certificate. I worked for the tribe for about a year before deciding to attend law school. I was definitely not a typical law school student, as I was older and had many years of work experience. I took the law school admission test and was accepted to the University of Wisconsin Law School in Madison, where I attended from '96 to '99. Now, fast forward to 2014, when I left my position after 13 years working as a tribal legislative counsel in Minnesota. I had worked at the time for 4 of the 5 elected officials, and 3 of my bosses lost their reelection bid. So you can imagine it was probably a good decision to leave after many years of working at the same place. The inside joke is that if you're a tribal attorney and you last that long, that's really quite a record. My husband works in a specialized field as a regulator for professional boxing and MMA, and I encouraged him to look for another job at the same time because due to tribal preference, if there was a tribal member who wanted that particular position, they would probably get it if they had even a slight amount of the qualifications. So I encouraged him to apply for an opening in Austin, Texas, and he got the job. So he started his job in combative sports in 2015, and I joined him after selling the house in 2017. And then while searching for a job in Texas, I reconnected with CASA in Travis County, and I went through the training and the background investigation. My first case involved a little boy whose mother was a lineal descendant of an Oklahoma tribe, and his father was a Puerto Rican who had moved to Texas from New York City. He was removed from his father's home when teachers alerted CPS about bruises and bites reported to be caused by the father's girlfriend. The boy's mother was not in the child's life because the father would not allow her to see the young boy. When I met the child, he had been placed in a foster home that included a boy about his own age. Perhaps because the boy's father had a disability, the young boy was very familiar with handheld games, but he had no experience with the out of doors. He did not know how to ride a bike or swim. The foster family's son did his best to involve the young boy in all of his activities. He learned to swim in the backyard pool and join the local scouting group. He never did take to the bicycle, though, for some reason. During some of our monthly visits, we went bowling and visited the Thinkery in Austin, which is a children's campus that's geared towards science. His favorite place, though, was McDonald's. I stayed on this case for about a year or so as it worked its way through the system. The child was eventually placed with his mother in Oklahoma, since it was determined that the father was unable to create a safe environment for the child. The CPS caseworker and the child flew to Oklahoma at least 4 times to ensure that the child was comfortable and that he had bonded with his mother. The mother went through the background investigation and her home was assessed by the state. She filed her case plan, and the tribe that she was affiliated with provided some counseling and other services for her. I had the opportunity to visit him in Oklahoma on a personal trip I made when I traveled through the state. He was very proud to show me his bedroom and introduce me to his baby sister. Did I think it was a perfect situation? No, I wished better for him on many different levels. But I knew that this was where he belonged with his family and where he was loved. Soon after this, I accepted a job in Wisconsin and I left CASA again to pursue the next chapter in my life. However, CASA has made an impact on my heart. I know that the connection that a CASA can make with the child or children that they serve, because I had that same connection. The guardian ad litem may visit the child once or twice, but a CASA connects with that child every month. You talk to their teachers and counselors, their families. You do this so that you can bring honesty to your reports and so that you can speak with integrity at court hearings. I admire all of the CASAs who give of their time and their hearts so that a child may feel that someone is looking out for his or her best interest. It is my wish to have a CASA program in my community, as I believe that the children who are removed from the home can benefit. I know that there are community members who would like to help, but who do not know how. Perhaps they're not able to foster a child, but they would like to be a CASA volunteer. I'm in the beginning stages of this process, and I'll do my best to bring it to fruition. Miigwech, thank you for inviting me here today. I wish you all a wonderful conference so that you can continue to do all the great things that you do for the children. So I think there are some questions now.
Judge, I'm putting some of the questions in the chat box for you that I've seen so far. And I'm just scrolling through to make sure that I haven't missed any.
We have a fellow tribal member from Nevada. So I'm not quite sure which
You have to scroll up. So a couple of the questions we've received, Judge, what information gives you the best insight as a judge to make your decision?
I think it's to be a good judge to me is all about listening and to have compassion for the people that are in front of you and not think of yourself as above them, but to think of them as people who are trying to figure out their lives, because certain things have happened to them, and it's kind of a problem solver role that I see. And the information that I gained from being a CASA, I think is really helpful when I have these minor and native care cases in front of me. And also have personal experience with a family member who had addiction issues, and I know it affects the whole family. It doesn't just affect that one individual. And addictions are really very difficult, no matter what kind it is. And then the training that I've had with the Healing to Wellness Court too, I think also assist with these minor native care cases, because we don't see children who are removed from the home because of neglect. It's usually because, you know, mom is selling drugs out of a motel room and the children are there, or the police show up and there's drugs sales going on in the house and the kids are there. So it's usually a critical reason. And it's very heartbreaking that I see a lot of parents who are stuck in this role for 2 or 3 years. And I just wonder sometimes if they're ever going to get out of it. But I think you have to use all the tools that are on your tool belt to try to make the best decision for the best interest of the children. And luckily we have grandparents that show up and take the children in. We have aunties and uncles and other distant family members. And on the tribal level, you know, your cousins are like your sisters and brothers. And so we often have second cousins, even third cousins, who sometimes show up and will offer to take these children in and provide them a home, because their parents can't. Sometimes the grandparents can't because they're in the same situation. It's a very sad situation.
Okay, we have several more questions that are coming in. From your perspective and having your experience as a CASA and now as a judge making decisions for the children, how can a CASA best advocate for a child? So can you give our participants 2 things that really make a difference in what they can do as a CASA for a child?
Well, I think that just to make a a connection. I guess it was, I don't want to say easy, but as a grandmother, I often kind of tried to think of them as how would I treat my own grandchildren? I want my own grandchildren to be treated if they were in this situation. And so I try to reach the child when I have that monthly visit and just, talk to them on one-on-one and see what's going on with them without being real nosy, and try to take them on an activity, because a lot of these kids, they haven't been taken any place or done anything that's real exciting. And so sometimes just taking them, like the little boy that I took bowling, he had never been bowling in his life, and he thought that was the greatest thing. But or had never been to the museum or to Thinkery. He had never been there. He lived in Austin, but he had never gone there. And so just try to think of places that you can take the child where they can connect better with you or begin to trust you better, I guess, would be the thing that I would want. If I were in that child's seat, I would want to be around somebody that I felt that I trusted.
Okay, we have, I think 4 more have come in already. So are you feeling like you're in the hot seat?
I guess
Um,
on those monthly reports, I mean, when I was a CASA, we were kind of taught exactly what we were supposed to be writing in those reports, and then they were looked at first, by the supervisor of our group of CASAs before they were submitted to the court. So it was very specific as to what we had to have in those reports. But I'm not a judge for CASA, but I am a judge for MNC, and the court reports that I see are prepared by the caseworkers who work for ICW. And then they're reviewed by the attorney who represents them. And so they're a little bit different than what a CASA would write, for a judge that they're appearing before. So it'd be a little difficult for me to say, but I think just to probably give I know that when I was in Travis County, I think her name is Judge Byrne, and she just loved the CASAs because she knew that she would get the best information because they saw the children on a regular basis. And if you would just give her the insight, your insights or whatever they were about the particular child, because she knew that the CASA was going to talk to the people at the schools and reach out to the counselor and talk to different family members, and just would have a good idea as to how the child was feeling and how they were doing in their foster placement. So I think those are really excellent things to do because the judge is hearing from different sides, and it really needs to have that third person kind of tell them, I've talked to the child, I've talked to this one, and this is what I have seen. I think it's very helpful. I think I get that same kind of feeling from the guardian ad litems, because I'm hearing from 2 competing sides, and I don't know who's right or wrong. I don't know the people in front of me, so I really value that information.
So I have a follow-up question to that, Judge. When you're getting those opposite perspectives, does the CASA's opinion or objective, because they are objective, does that weigh more heavily so that your balance is tipped one way or the other? Who has the best insight into the best interest of the children?
Well, I think it often can assist the judge in making a decision, that's for sure. Because, for instance, one parent may not be telling you that they just got picked up a couple of days before with possession of meth charge. And, but the guardian ad litem may research CCAP, which is open to everybody. If you just want to go online, you could see who was arrested and who's in jail and so on. I mean, I can't do that as the judge, but guardian ad litem may bring that to my attention and let me know that that happened. And so that information is valuable at the time it happens, because otherwise, how would you know?
Right.
I just saw a comment that in Wisconsin, they're not allowed to bring the kids anywhere. We can walk to a park, but I believe that's it. Oh, okay. So it's a little bit different. I always had to wear my badge and identify myself as a CASA when I had the child with me. But, and I always put in my report, but we were kind of encouraged to, you know, I'd take them for ice cream or I'd take them for a hamburger or something. But I would get permission, you know, to be able to take him bowling or other places. And sometimes he would just sit outside in the yard and just talk to each other. They get to be excited to see you. I know many CASAs, you probably experience that same thing, but your little person is excited to see you because you become like their special friend. And they kind of recognize that in you as somebody who's interested in them.
And those consistent visits,
Yes.
kids know that they're coming. So
Yeah.
how can we be most mindful when we're advocating for Native children?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is that they don't have any interactions at all, or they don't have any positive interactions with people who don't look like them. And so they may not trust you. It may take a little longer to get them to open up and to get them to really consider you a friend. And kids are really smart. You know, they know who likes them and who doesn't like them. And I guess if we just leave our judgments at the door when they meet, and you know, that would be helpful too, because some of these kids have had such trauma. You know, it may not be the type of life that you are used to or you have experienced, but is what they know. And they don't think there's anything different about it. I mean, because that's all they know. And I know it's difficult sometimes, but you know, like I said, kids are really smart and they can pick up on everything.
So because the kids are so smart, Judge, can you give us one thing as a non-Native person besides humility and really putting on our listening ears, one way that we can start to build that trust with them?
Well, I guess first, don't assume that you understand them, because you know you're not Native, and even though you may care a lot about them and want to be helpful, you know, you should not consider that you know what their life is about, because it is a different culture and a different way of life. And I can tell you that just because they're quiet and they don't speak at first does not mean that they're not super intelligent. Some of them are very, very intelligent. It's just that this is just the way that Native people are. Native people have an incredible sense of humor. They're always laughing and joking and teasing each other, but they may not show you that because they don't know you. And it'll take a while.
So patience.
Yeah, just have some patience. And then I think even as a Native person, you know, when you meet a Native child, it takes a while. It just, especially when they've been through the trauma that they have been through, it is not going to have an easy answer for you. You just have to give it some time.
Okay, that kind of segues into the next question that we got. Can you describe from a Native perspective how important it is for Native children to remain connected to their tribe?
Oh, I think it's very, very important, very important. And, unfortunately, there are a lot of Native people who haven't been raised with the culture and traditions. And so they've missed that. But if they are children who are from the reservation, especially, or even if they've lived in town but close to the reservation because of the housing shortage, it's really important to help them to reconnect or to stay in touch so they don't feel entirely lost out there in the big world. And you could do that through finding cultural activities that they may be able to connect to, or I know that there are books that are available that are written for children. There are quite a few of them out now that, may help them to recognize that you're thinking about them and what might be important for them. If there's powwows in your area, you could go to your first powwow. But it sounds like a lot of CASAs are not able to take their children many places. So maybe my experience was a little bit different than what a lot of CASAs do.
And if we as non-Native people, Judge, could attend a powwow just so that we can have that conversation with a child we would advocate for, would that be something tangible we could do?
Well, sure. I think that CASAs, powwows are open to everybody. They're a big welcoming gathering. And especially if you are a veteran, when they honor the veterans, they always ask the audience to participate if they are a veteran, or if they want to honor a veteran in their family, just to come on down to the grounds and join in. Or they have an all dance. Sometimes powwows will have certain dances that are restricted to certain type of dancers, but sometimes they'll have it open to everybody. And you can just get down there if you want to and try your best. And nobody's there to judge you, but we're trying to open up our culture and welcome you. You're our guest. And so if you wanted to attend a powwow that was close to an area where you work and live, that might bring some insight, that you may be able to connect maybe with the child on that level and say, I attended a powwow not too long ago, and that was my first one, and I sure did think that was interesting. And just admit that I don't know everything, and I had never attended one before, and it was really good. And that fry bread was really good. And that Indian taco was really good.
I can't wait to go to my first one up in Lakota. We have quite a few more questions. Kathleen, what would be a deal breaker for you as a judge to place we're going to get really sensitive here. Kathleen, thank you for this question. What would be a deal breaker for you as a judge to place a Native child in a non-Native home?
Well, sometimes you don't have options. I know here at Lakota, we don't have very many Native families who are willing to foster children. They will open their homes up, but to go through that whole system to be like a licensed foster care worker, or foster care parent, I should say, we have very few. And I'm hoping that that more people will step up, because we do have a lot of wonderful families. There's a lot of terrible things going on, but we have a lot of wonderful families who have strong family connections, and really good people. And but it's a difficult thing, to be a foster parent, and I think it takes special people. But we do have a non-native licensed foster home that lives within the exterior boundaries of our reservation. And they are just excellent. And they do their very best to connect with the culture, with the children. And the children go to we have our own school, so they go to the school here, or they go to Hayward. And, so they still connect with the community because they're living within the community, but yet they're living in this non-native foster home. And, sometimes that is all that's available, unfortunately, but they do their very best. And I know that, so I don't have any problems, placing a child there if it's been recommended by ICW. And I've gotten to know the family over the years that I've been on the bench, and I know they're good people.
Judge, you and I have had this conversation, and if you want to pass on this question, I absolutely respect that, but I'm going to ask a really sensitive one. And you and I talked about this recently. How do we, as non-native people, how can you explain to us how sometimes we can't best advocate for a native child?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So we had this conversation last week about non-native advocates advocating for native children, and how sometimes we just can't do as well as a native advocate could do. Are you willing to go to that sensitive topic, or do you want us to move on?
Well, I think that it's just going to be a difficult thing. And I mean, for instance, I am not the best person to advocate for a Hispanic child, or for a person who's been raised in an African American or Black family. I don't understand all the sensitivities and the cultural or feelings of belonging that they have being raised in that type of a family. And so, as much as I would be able to advocate for the child in general, it would be very difficult for me to, I think, to do that. And I know in Texas, there's a lot of brown people in Texas because they're so close to the border, and there are a lot of professional people who are Hispanic, attorneys, judges, a lot of advocates, CASA workers, but I think it just makes a difference just to have somebody advocate for you who understands what your life is all about, or has a little inkling of understanding what your life is all about. And I know that's not always possible.
Okay, thank you for going there. I appreciate it. We have a couple more questions here. One of them, can you share your perspective of ICWA and how it impacts CASA advocacy?
Well, first of all, I don't do any ICWA. ICWA is, as you know, Indian Child Welfare Law, and that usually takes place when a native child outside of the reservation comes before the court at the county level. And so then our ICW director and the tribal attorney who works for the ICWA department handles those cases. And so they don't come before the tribal court. They are held before the county court. And so there is a disconnect there. And I have never practiced Indian child welfare law as an attorney. And so when I became a judge, just this whole child protection, all the rules and regulations, I mean, it was a learning curve for me, because I could talk to you about bankruptcy, but I could not, explain every little nuance to you about child protection. So I don't quite know how to answer that one, I'm afraid.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. We have another couple of questions. COVID makes everything more difficult, particularly taking the kids for whom we advocate on outings. Do you see impacts on court processes due to COVID where CASAs and the kids are involved? We don't have CASA in Le Coudray right now, but do you see an impact on court proceedings due to COVID?
I do, because, I didn't see a lot of the kids in court even before COVID. Sometimes the kids would show up, or if they were old enough, and even today, if a child is old enough and they wanted to talk to me, I would have them come into the court, and I would be present with my clerk, and they would be free to just talk to me about what they wanted, whether it was their real feelings about a custody situation, or maybe some fear that they had, or so I have done that a few times, but it's very, very difficult. As you know, with COVID, it changes everything. We are doing our hearings here on the phone most of the time. And then we had our courtroom remodeling project going on. And so now we're getting to the end of that process. But the number of positive cases in our county has just jumped like crazy just within the past month. And so I'm still kind of trying to figure out when it's safe to open up everything. All our Healing to Wellness Court participants are appearing on Zoom. And, I'm very, very happy that we haven't lost anybody to overdose or anything like that, but it is very hard for them to stay on this path of sobriety and not be able to feel all the support that the team offers to them, on one-on-one. We're doing this via Zoom, and it's a little difficult to do that. But I'll be glad when, we are feeling more safe and we can come back into the court. But I try to make the court feel like it's their courtroom. It doesn't belong to me. I want the community to feel that this is their court, and we are here to listen to them and to try to help them sort out all their issues and problems. And when I do get parents on the phone and their children have been taken away, and sometimes they're there for the review hearings and the extension hearings, and I will talk to them and I'll ask them how they're doing on their sobriety path. What have they been doing, and are you employed now? Did you find a place to live? Housing is a big, big problem up here. We cannot find adequate housing for so many people. And of course, they can't have their child back, even if they're sober, if they don't have decent housing or any housing in order to take the child back. So it's a big issue. And I don't know if, when I went to a judges conference, child protection, I didn't hear one judge talk about that being a problem for them, that they could not find adequate housing. So I don't know what the answer is, but I'm not a policymaker, so I don't have the power to kind of change things that way, but I can recognize the issues and I can bring them to the policymakers. That's about all I can do.
Okay, we have quite a few chats going on right now. CASAs are the best. We do this work because we are passionate about the work. Go CASAs. Thank you, Kathleen. We can't transport in Kansas either. The family has to get the children to any place to meet the CASA if you want to take them on an outing. Kathleen, I just had a case where the father thought he was hot. He looked me up and down at the home visit. I almost threw up. When we were in court, he winked at me. I was halfway tempted to ask the deputy to arrest him. He said the mother left him, no idea why. Turns out he was a violent, abusive man. Going on, I do agree that we become special friends to our kiddos. Absolutely. They look forward to your visits. Every person needs a connection to their family, whomever that family may be. For your time this afternoon, it was very helpful. I believe, Judge, that's directed to you. For those in Wisconsin, the Honor of the Earth powwow in Hayward is amazing. I go every year.
It is amazing.
If you click on this link, it will sit in your browser until after this presentation. It gives a list of some upcoming powwows. Thank you for that resource. Am I being native by thinking I can advocate? Oh, naive, I'm sorry. Am I being naive by thinking I can advocate for a child because he or she is a child? I'm coming from a background of 20 years in juvenile probation. Judge, are you comfortable answering that one?
Well, again, I think for many of us, because we may have a lot of experience with children, doesn't mean that we understand about all the different cultures. And I think we just need to be mindful of that. That's all. Just take a step back and realize that, okay, I have all this experience with children, but I really am not a Native person, or I'm not a Hispanic person, or I'm not a Black person. So maybe I don't know some of the things that may be important to this child.
And I think it's fair, because you and I had this chat last week, it's fair to be passionate and compassionate about the situation the child is in, but not coming up from a place of arrogance where we can completely understand. And I know, Judge, in the times that I've met with you and your tribal council, it's just having humility and being vulnerable enough to say you just don't know, because I don't know. And that's why I learned so much from you, and I'm grateful for you.
Well, thank you. I remember when I brought Sue up to meet my tribal council for the first time, and I mean, there was immediate suspicion, like, what is this CASA organization, and what kind of people are going to be talking to our kids, and because people don't understand, but that was their immediate kind of response.
It was tense there for a while, but then they were very welcoming, and I left feeling very grateful for them giving me that compassion. Patty, how would you recommend CASA supervisors best support non-Native advocates with Native kids?
Well, I think, again, just to repeat what we already said, just to kind of be more mindful of, recognizing that the way they've been raised is probably different than what and that it will take a little longer I think, for them to warm up to you. And just because they're quiet the first, second, third time you meet them doesn't mean that, they'll never warm up to you. It's just going to take them a long time, because they're taken out of the home and they may be with a non-Native foster home, and everything is different. It may be quieter. It may be less cluttered than what they're used to, or more cluttered. I mean, you just never know. And maybe they have a lot of siblings, and maybe they miss their siblings. So all kinds of things can be affecting them. Miss their dog.
Okay, we have from Washoe County, and I know I'm saying that right because somebody did the phonetics for me earlier. It says, thanks for the tremendous depth in this response. I think that, Judge, speaks to your willingness to be vulnerable, and we appreciate that. We have one more question here. What are some key takeaways you'd like everyone in this webinar to remember?
Just, I so appreciate each and every one of you as a CASA, because I mean, I know that you care about these children, and I know that you're volunteering your time. You've gone through all this training, and you're giving up your time during the month to go see the child and write your report and stay connected. And that just shows that you are a very, very caring person. And just keep on doing what you're doing, because there are so many children out there that need you, so many of them. And I know we can't help each and every one, but just keep on doing the good work.
Yes, that is absolutely true. We have from Michelle. She says, thank you so very much for this insight. We appreciate your time and information. This was wonderful.
Well, miigwech
Yay.
to all of you. Miigwech. I really am glad that I was able to offer some little bit of insight. Thank you.
And we have another one. Thanks for your information and insight into being a judge and former CASA. We have 3 more minutes, Judge. Any last minute words of advice, knowledge, experience?
Well, just, I mean, I just really wish that things would move faster along so that our CASA program, could see taking some type of shape up here. But, like I said, we're in the beginning stages, and we are still going to work towards that walk run that we're going to have in the spring. Hopefully COVID will have settled down by then, because I think that'll be important for the kids. And if you haven't gone to a powwow yet, go check it out.
I look forward to doing that walk run with you. We thank you so very much, Judge, for your time. You're getting a wealth of thank yous in the chat box. We're going to cut you out 2 minutes early, and I hope you have an incredible rest of your day. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for participating today.
Bye.